Welcome to The Future of LA's Infrastructure, Transportation, Power, and Sustainability, presented by HNTB. Now a word from our session sponsor.
Morning. My name is Joshua Englander, Associate Vice President and Government Relations Director for the Western United States for HNTB. On behalf of the more than 200 HNTB employee owners throughout Southern California, I'd like to welcome you to Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce's State of LA Business Panel, focusing on the future of LA's infrastructure. Infrastructure plays a vital role in our economy, from moving our goods from the Twin Ports to safely moving our loved ones from home to work and to school eventually. Infrastructure keeps us moving towards the future we all dream about, and it is also an economic driver during good times and bad. FDR created the largest public works program in history to help us get out of the Great Depression. And President Eisenhower created the interstate highway system to connect Americans like never before, creating millions of good-paying jobs along the way. HNTB has played an integral role in the shape of LA's transportation history, from designing the iconic Colorado Street Bridge in Pasadena over 100 years ago to the new and soon-to-be iconic 6th Street Bridge in downtown LA. Our work can be seen when millions of visitors come through the new Tom Bradley International Terminal, take a ride along the LAX Automated People Mover, Angelinos drive along the HNTB Design 405 to get home every single day. And soon enough, they'll be riding along this Boulevard Transit Corridor, which HNTB is currently working on today. HNTB is here, and I am proud to represent HNTB this morning as we kick off our session. This morning's discussion is around the future of LA's infrastructure, transportation, power, and sustainability. We have some incredible speakers today, so on behalf of HNTB, please sit back and enjoy the ride.
Please join me in welcoming our moderator for this session, Hilary Norton, who serves as chair of the California Transportation Commission and brings over 28 years of experience in transportation and community development to her role. Welcome, Hilary Norton.
Thank you, Josh, and our co-sponsor, HNTB, and thank you to the LA Chamber. It is an honor for me to be your moderator as chair of the CTC, which manages over $5 billion a year in SB1 gas tax funds to invest in transportation and infrastructure. It is with great pleasure that I get to introduce our expert panelists for this panel, The Future of LA's Infrastructure, Transportation, Power, and Sustainability. What an important topic for our region today and for our future. California is facing an unparalleled fire season, wreaking havoc on the power grid and our air quality. As our region begins the safe reopening and recovery of our economy due to COVID-19, what strategic investments must we make to modernize our infrastructure, enhance our stability and sustainability, and further our resiliency? Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Gary Giroud was appointed LA County's first sustainability officer in November of 2016. Gary previously served as the president of the Climate Action Reserve, and he now serves as the vice chair of its board of directors. Stephen Powell serves as executive vice president of operations for Southern California Edison, one of the nation's largest electric utilities, serving over 5 million customers. And Phil Washington, CEO of the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, Metro, which runs the United States' third busiest transit system, with 2,200 clean air buses, the second largest bus fleet in the entire country, and 6 rail lines covering 98 miles, with 4 additional major rail projects in construction and a next-gen bus study in process. Phil is also chairman of the American Public Transportation Association, APTA's, National COVID-19 Response, its Mobility, Recovery, and Restoration Task Force. Please join me in welcoming our members and panelists. First, let me start with some questions for our panelists today. Phil, could you please tell us about the most significant impacts that COVID-19 has had on public transit and LA Metro itself? How have ridership and budgets changed, and how have these changes affected your revenues and operations? And finally, what effects are you and your task force seeing nationally?
Yes, Hilary, thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be on this esteemed panel. We've been impacted by COVID-19 quite a bit. Our ridership pre-COVID is about 1.2 million people a day. we got down to 275,000 a day. And that's a huge drop from that 1.2 to 275,000. I'm happy to report that we're seeing a steady increase over the past several months, where we are up around or over 600,000 a day. So that ridership is slowly rebounding, but it has had a tremendous impact on not just our ridership, but our revenue as well, as you would imagine. We are primarily funded by sales tax revenue, and we estimate and forecasted a $1.8 billion loss in revenue over 2 fiscal years, and that is huge. And we are really no different from the other large transit agencies that rely heavily on sales tax revenue. The CARES Act funding from the first stimulus, if you will, that was signed into law by the president in March, where transit got 25 billion of the 3.3 trillion that Congress passed. LA County got about $1 billion of that. We apportioned that out amongst the other mobility providers here in LA County, and LA Metro got about 161 million of that. That obviously is not enough to really plug the $1.8 billion loss that we're suffering through sales tax, but it did help. So we are keeping things moving. There's been a number of challenges, but I'm happy to say that just last month, the Metro Board of Directors approved our 2021 budget. That budget is less than the $7.2 billion budget that we had last year. It's in the neighborhood of $6 billion, but it really calls for a continued level of service, which is about 80% of our pre-pandemic service. It allows us to keep our many projects moving, not as fast as we want them to move, but they are moving. And it allows us, those projects that are in construction, to continue. And those projects are many: the Crenshaw line, the Purple line that will go eventually out to the VA hospital, the regional connector downtown, and also the Gold line out to past Azusa into Claremont. So we're moving not as fast as we want, but the impacts have been great.
And to follow up, how do you see this impacting the national transit arena in your other role, managing the national stage?
Sure. Well, I think that, and I was talking to some folks earlier today, and I made the statement that I think transit, we are facing an existential threat, as with regard to the funding that is needed to keep public transit going. When I look at the large transit systems in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles, and other areas of the country, transit needs that second stimulus very, very bad. I mean, this session is the future of LA infrastructure, but I have to say it really goes to the question of how do we want to live in our urban areas in this country. We must have public transportation. If we do not have public transportation and rely on cars, then our climate is going to suffer total gridlock in this region, not just congestion, but total gridlock. And so what I see nationally, especially with COVID, is transit agencies really looking to enhance their cleaning protocols. Many, if not all of them, are requiring face coverings, and many, if not all of them, are enhancing their air circulation on their buses and trains. That national effort that I was honored to lead really was looking to regain the public trust for public transit. And I think we've done that with a national campaign that we're calling a commitments campaign, and asking transit agencies and riders to commit to the cleaning protocol and the protocols that we've put in place. So I think over 200 agencies have signed up for this commitments program, where they will display emblems and commitment logos on their buses and on their trains. So I think we're all speaking with one voice nationally, and that becomes very, very important as we move forward to rescue public transit through the COVID-19 crisis.
Well, thank you so much for that perspective. Stephen, moving to you, how has Edison and the energy industry been impacted due to the fires in California and during the pandemic? What changes might be more permanent even after these two crises ease?
Yeah, thanks, Hilary. And Phil, the challenges you guys are going through are huge. I think everybody's experiencing just amazing challenges this year, and frankly, so much adjustment. First, as I look at how we've been impacted, there's the employee side and there's the customer side as we try to manage the grid. On the employee side, like many other companies, when the pandemic hit, we took 2/3 of our workforce and moved to teleworking. So people are working from home. I'm working from home still. Most of our offices are relatively empty. We still have 1/3 of our team that is either in the office or primarily out in the field managing the grid, because the work still has to happen there. And so a lot of it is, how do we get the right protocols to keep our workers safe, and as they're out working in the fields and in the offices. So a lot of the things that you mentioned, Phil, that we have to do in public transit, we need the same things for our workers kind of across the economy. Maybe as I look to the other challenges we ran into early on, one of the big ones was, I think everyone realizes how important electricity is to their lives, but then when you have to be at home all day every day and work and have your kids go to school, it really brings a whole new perspective on the importance of electricity. We've got 15 million customers across 50,000 square miles that we serve. And early on, we started to get stop work notices from local jurisdictions that didn't want us to turn the power off for critical work that we needed to be doing. And so we've got, just like you mentioned, we're dealing with wildfires over a number of years, and we have big infrastructure programs that we have to deliver to protect our customers and our grid in high fire areas. And we were being told not to do that work because people were at home. So we had to work really closely with local jurisdictions and frankly step our game up in terms of the communication that we do. Think a little bit differently about how we take shorter outages. Frankly, sometimes when we take outages at night or weekends, these things all come at a cost, though, to how efficiently you can do the work, how you resource it. So we've had to deal with a lot of change that's been a lot of collaboration with local communities, as well as better communication with our customers, so they know what to expect and what's coming. So a lot of learnings there in terms of how we actually get the grid work done. But it's that challenge of we don't want people to panic, and we don't want them to run to a Starbucks or somewhere else where there is power. We want them to be able to stay home. But we've got to get this critical work done, because if we don't prepare ourselves for wildfire season and harden the system over time, we will end up in places where we do have to leverage a lot of our public safety power shutoff program that people don't want to deal with come the Santa Ana wind season around here. So lots of, a lot of things learning just in getting the actual infrastructure work done. The other side with customers is also just customers paying their bills. And so, as we've gotten into the summer, we have about 50% more account receivables than we would in a usual summer, because a lot of folks can't pay their bills, and we're not disconnecting residential and small commercial customers. As soon as the pandemic, disconnecting customers. So there's a lot more customers that either aren't able to pay bills, and we're getting them onto levelized payment plans, trying to get them onto, in some cases, better low income rates for them. But there's a lot of work just to do with our customers to kind of help everyone through this. I think there's a lot that we don't know about, but there's been a lot that we've learned that will be sustained as we get past the pandemic. I think about as we go and deliver customer programs, energy efficiency, audits of energy usage, or for transportation electrification, we're starting to do a lot more of that virtually. And so we don't actually have to go visit and talk to customers. We can talk on the phone, we can use aerial images. There's lots of things that we can do virtually that we weren't doing before. So I think this has really accelerated I'd say the digital transformation of an industry that has, been slow on the uptake of a lot of digital technologies over time. So those are the sort of things that will be really important going forward, including really just the engagement on outages and with our customers.
Well, thank you. And thank you for SE's compassion as people are coming to you with the issues about paying their bills. And we're going to get to some more questions about the connectivity between EV infrastructure and EV mobility in a few questions. But first, I wanted to get to Gary. And that was the role that sustainability and resiliency plays in our COVID-19 recovery and in our overall connectivity, because we're seeing more and more that this interdependence in cleaner fuels and EV infrastructure for our mobility and just how we live our lives is so important. Can you talk about your leadership in this role and what the county has done with its full plan on the sustainability front? Okay, do you want me to go to Phil? Phil, while we're waiting for Gary to connect, I think Steve teed this up well in talking about the connectivity with EV infrastructure and the needs that you have just to operationalize the 2,200 EV buses you have and a lot more requests for the EV for a lot of other systems. Can you talk about how your industries are talking and what more can be done to invest in making sure that the grid is capable of serving your needs, and so that we can have a fully capable mobility network that is zero emissions?
Yes. So in 2017, our board adopted a motion endorsing a comprehensive plan for us to transition to from clean natural gas to electrifying our entire fleet. And what we said is that we've pledged to electrify our entire fleet by 2030. Now that's 10 years ahead of the California mandate of 2040. And so we are going about the business of converting 100% of our fleet to zero emissions. And that has been, very challenging. We have started with one of our bus rapid transit lines called the Orange Line in San Fernando Valley. And we anticipate all of the buses on that particular line to be electrified by the end of this year. We will then start with what we call our Silver Line, and we will electrify that entire fleet by the end of next year. But one of the things that I will say, two things. We want to be what I call on the leading edge and not the bleeding edge. And one of my concerns with this whole issue of electrifying the various bus fleets is we need a national policy and a national goal to electrify. And we need that for no other reason than the prices would go down because of the volume of units that would be sold. We're sitting here in Los Angeles with a 2030 goal. I talked to my buddy in Chicago at Chicago Transit Authority, and I said, "Hey, Dorval, when are you going to electrify your fleet?" And Dorval said, "Hey, Phil, I'm gonna wait till you do yours, and I'll see how it works out." Well, that right there does not work, because one 60-foot electric bus is running about $1.3 million versus a CNG bus that is about $500,000, maybe $600,000. And so, yes, we're out front. We want to be out front in electrifying our fleet, but we have to go in with a degree of knowledge that we're going to pay more. It's like buying the new iPhone, right? The new iPhone is coming out. You go down there and you sleep outside the door or whatever, and you go in. You're the first one to get it. Guess what? You're going to pay the top price. versus waiting maybe 6 months or so until that price goes down. So the same thing is occurring on zero emission buses. Unless we have a national policy around this area, agencies like ours here in Los Angeles are going to pay more because we're ahead of the game. It's great to be, again, on that cutting edge, but we have to know that we are going to be on the bleeding edge of prices in terms of paying for that. But we are totally committed to electrifying our fleet. And the last thing I'll say, Hilary, is electrifying the various fleets. In my mind, that's just a drop in the bucket, though. That's a drop in the bucket as it relates to reducing our carbon footprint, right? I mean, if we're really serious about reducing our carbon footprint, we need traffic reduction programs, i.e. congestion pricing, to reduce the number of people driving in their cars. And I think until we do both these things, right, a traffic reduction program, electrifying not just buses, but light duty vehicles, heavy duty vehicles, that sort of thing, we won't make a dent in the emission and the climate change issues that we're faced with.
Well, that's a great segue to getting back to Gary and talking about the county and your vision in your plan and how that vision can actually help propel maybe a national conversation. And then I'd love for you to talk about your work, but also react to the things that have just been said, because I think you have an opportunity to coalesce all of that.
Yeah, that's great. And sorry about any technical trouble that we may have had. Talking about recovery, I think from the government's perspective is sometimes difficult because we're still, and we want to acknowledge that we're still in the middle of this crisis, right? People are getting sick every day, people are dying every day, and government is on the front lines of that response. So I do want to acknowledge that and say that the county and my heart goes out to those who've suffered during this pandemic. A significant portion of our workforce, quite honestly, has been declared disaster services workers. I think something on the order of 40% of public health department employees are working now on contact tracing. And my own position, I've been assigned to our emergency operations center to lead our food security and feeding efforts. And I now have a staff of several hundred from parks and libraries and beaches and harbors and children and family services and public health, providing direct food aid to those in need. And we see the suffering every day. We're not entirely thinking about recovery yet, but we know we need to, and sustainability certainly has to be part of that. One of the things that I would say is that I think this is a bit of an inflection point. I think Steve certainly pointed out how the acceleration of the use of digital technologies is happening. That's happening in the county as well, and I think that's an opportunity for us to really leverage the crisis if we can to create some good. But I do want to also say that we know that COVID has disproportionately affected communities of color. That's clear in the numbers, but that's true about environmental pollution and that's true about climate change. And today, 1 in 4 Black children in Los Angeles suffer from asthma. To me, that's just astounding and tragic. And to be honest, it's a bit by design because it's a result of legacy racist policies like redlining and exclusionary zoning that I think we also now need to work to dismantle those at this instant. So getting back to the question, though, I think we have been thinking about things on what a good recovery would look like, what a sustainable recovery would look like. We're part of the LA Clean Tech Incubator's Transportation Electrification Partnership, and as is Edison, Southern California Edison and Metro, along with the California Air Resources Board and LA DWP and the Mayor's Office and others. And we've collectively put forward a $150 billion federal stimulus proposal. And I think this starts to get at what Phil was talking about around having national policy. I think we have to have a national policy, stimulus policy, but also a national electrification. And of course, the Air Board has adopted rules for clean buses throughout California. And Steve can certainly tell you about being on the bleeding edge, because companies like Edison were on the early adopters of renewable energy technologies when they were much more expensive than they are today. But that proposal, that $150 billion proposal, looks at things like manufacturing, operations, and maintenance of EV technologies. You know, we have 3 electric bus manufacturers here in LA now, and we want to see LA become the hub of a new clean transportation infrastructure system. So we also have put in money there for EV charging, for public transit, for safe streets, for active transportation, but also things around workforce development. And the estimate from our consultants are that if we invested this $150 billion, that would create 1.4 million jobs. And the House has taken this up. We actually proposed this to the federal government. The House has taken it up, but of course it's languished in the Senate. So we're hopeful that a future administration will pick up this sort of idea of using the COVID crisis, the economic crisis that came from COVID, and responding to climate change to really move investments in clean technology. The other thing I'll say is that we're not just waiting for federal investments, though. The voters of LA County, of course, adopted several large funding measures in the last few years. Measure M, of course, around transportation, but Measure W for stormwater infrastructure, Measure A for parks, and even Measure H. And the Board of Supervisors said, let's put the task force together of these 4 major funding measures and see if we can coordinate leverage resources. And my office is the chair of that task force, and we've been working with stakeholders, community groups, businesses, others, to make sure that these funds get spent equitably and they don't really result in the displacement of people, because we know that with sustainability investments, there can also be displacement, and we need to be cautious on that front. But all in all, the idea of recovery has to be wrapped in acknowledging that the opportunity that a crisis brings, and this is certainly one of the biggest crises I've experienced in my 30-plus career, allows us to actually take a leap forward on some of these clean technology initiatives and really address multiple issues at the same time.
That's great. And the bricks behind me are because in my day job, I lead FastLink DTLA's TMO, and we are a member of the LA Clean Tech Incubator. So this is all connecting up very nicely. I wanted to give Steve an opportunity to speak about the utility work in advocating for this national presence, for the grid security, and just bigger grid investments as we look at electrification across all walks of life, and what your company is doing and sort of how you're connecting up the national network to see that the federal government does its part.
Yeah, and so I think everything people are acknowledging here is part of the challenge of working in California, but also the fun part of working in California is you do get to be on the edge, whether it's bleeding or cutting. We have an energy grid that is absolutely in transition. But when we look at what has to be delivered, we know that in this state we can meet it. And a lot of this for us starts with the pathway that we put out. Last November, we released a paper that describes what we call Pathway 2045. Frankly, it aligns with the views of others on how we decarbonize this state. 100% clean electricity, at least 3/4 of electric vehicles electrified, 2/3 of buildings electrified. These are huge changes that have to happen over just a few decades. Even just on the electric grid side, we're talking about more than $200 billion of investment in the grid and renewables, transmission, distribution. So just tons of changes that have to happen. And I'd say I agree. We need national plans on a lot of these so that the country is moving together to bring costs down. But we also can't wait for those national plans. So, we have, it won't happen if we wait. So we have to be pushing and we have to drag others along. So, we engage, across, within our industry with the Edison Electric Institute. We work on the research side with Electric Power Research Institute. We work with the national labs. Really, it's also, though, we have to work across industries to solve these. We can't get people to buy electric vehicles, but we can do our part in terms of getting infrastructure out there within California. And so I think the programs that we're putting forth that, our Public Utilities Commission is agreeing that we should be investing in are lots of EV chargers. We've got more than $300 million, assigned to medium and heavy duty vehicles that are going to help get those the charging for those electric buses. We just got approval for another $430+ million for light duty vehicle charging, and we've been we've been helping get the infrastructure started. Don't know if that's our role for decades to come, but we have to be pushing to make it happen. All of the clean energy transition stuff is challenging, costly, and there's tons of innovation that has to happen. It's on top of the challenges we face right now. We won't get to that clean energy future if we can't manage our wildfire risk and frankly, just the overall climate change, be able to adapt. We had the first rotating outages in the California Independent System Operator, or broadly in California, in 19 years, this last August, and almost again in September, because of west-wide severe heat storms, while we're trying to manage a clean energy transition. And so the amount of coordination that has to happen with, frankly, it's not just utilities managing grids these days. We have community choice aggregators. We have lots of others that are contributing to this. The coordination that has to happen to get this transition is enormous. And it's not just in California. We have to coordinate it across the West. We need market design. So there's lots of components that have to come together. The wildfire one is a big cost, right? For us to get to a point where we're comfortable that the electric grid isn't going to be the cause of ignitions and catastrophic wildfires. We've got, frankly, billions of dollars of investment to do to harden the system, to cover the conductors that are out there so that when they drop, they aren't going to cause an ignition. We've had to invest more in inspections and vegetation management. And this is a multi-year both investment as well as challenge to reduce the risk. And continue to adapt to what is seems to be an escalating situation with the climate and how it's driving things in California. So when I look at those long-term clean energy transition, helping manage that today, helping people adopt electric vehicles, making sure the grid can manage it, and at the same time making the investments in just core, reliable, safe power. That's something that we deal with at Edison. I think all of the utilities in California deal with, and we're trying to learn and work with others across the nation so that we all can harden our systems to manage the local issues we have. The issues in the South are very different, where you've got hurricanes that we don't have here. So a lot of coordination, a lot of utilities coming together across the nation to get the investment that's needed, as well as just get the policies to support this.
Well, thank you for your thoughtful work on all of these levels. And I think this just opens up the next conversation with Phil, because you have been a national leader on not only mobility, but on the issue of equity and sustainability. And so I wanted to talk about where you are now on equity and how equity is fitting into your recovery plans and your sustainability goals.
Thank you for the question. Everything that we do, we are trying to look through the lens of equity. Programs, projects, things like the next gen bus plan that you mentioned, Hilary, all of those things we're looking through that lens of equity. How does it impact various communities? How does it impact low income communities? How does it impact communities of color? We have so many programs. I'll talk about just two. The first I'll talk about is a transportation school, a transportation infrastructure school that we are building right here in South Los Angeles. And this public high school / boarding school concept is going to focus on transportation infrastructure. Now, it's a college prep kind of environment, but I've often said that we talk about, the funding that we need for infrastructure, and that is very true. But I've also often talked about if all of the money, the funding that we needed for infrastructure fell from heaven tomorrow, like manna falling from heaven. If it fell tomorrow, I am concerned and doubt that we have the lack of a qualified workforce to build, rebuild, maintain, and operate the infrastructure that needs to be done in this country. And so when you think about equity and you think about preparing young people, high school kids even, especially in communities of color and low income communities, we can prepare them for work in the infrastructure space. And so this school ties right into equity in my mind. We are looking at opportunity youth to be in this school. We are focusing on the foster care system, kids in the foster care system. We're focusing on kids whose parents have been involved with the justice system. And we're looking at the historically underserved educationally kids right here in South Los Angeles. We're going to break ground on this school next week, October 21st, on the corner of Vermont and Manchester. At the end of the day, with full enrollment, there'll be 480 kids in this school, a boarding school concept. We have worked to bring a supermarket on that site in what is really considered a food desert in that community. We'll have affordable housing on that site. We'll have a transit plaza on that site. So this is equity at work, if you will, in the infrastructure space. And our vision on this, and we're partnering with the county, also Metro, and a contractor who's going to run the school for us called the Seed Foundation. But the idea on the school really is to brand LA County as the infrastructure capital of this country. And I think we can do that. We want these kids to graduate. Of course, some will go to college, some will go into the trades, but we want these kids to graduate, and those that don't go to college, and even if they do go to college, but have internships in our other infrastructure institutions, whether it is with Public Works, whether it's in Steve's shop, all of these kinds of things. The other thing I'll mention with regard to equity is our proposal and our introduction of a fareless transit system. And so what we have said and what we've introduced, what I introduced to our board in August, was that we should make transit fareless/free for everyone in this county. Now, that is a bold effort, but I believe that we have the moral obligation to find ways to make transit fareless, considering and recognizing the economic effect that COVID-19 has had on our riders and in this region. I believe that transit should be paid out of the public purse, just like library services, just like firefighting services. When we talk about climate and reducing our carbon footprint, making transit free, and recognizing that we want to promote social equity and expand economic opportunities for the people that need it most in this county, I can think of no better way to do that than through fareless transit. Now, there's a lot of challenges, we know that, but I have convened and commissioned a task force, and they're looking at all of the challenges that we would face, challenges like the unhoused and the homelessness on our system, challenges with regard to the funding that we have to make up for the box. But this, in my opinion, in terms of fareless transit is a matter of priorities. It's a matter of priorities. I mean, are we willing to do this and make this a priority to help the folks that need it the most in LA County?
Well said. I want to give Gary an opportunity to talk a little bit more about our county plan. And but before that, I want to let the audience know that we are going to start audience Q&A at 10:35. And we can see that they're queuing up with a lot of great questions. So just know that we'll be starting the audience questions at 10:35, and they're being sent to me. So Gary, with our county plan, what role did land use and transportation play in our sustainability goals, and what are the challenges you think we'll be facing reaching this goal as our population and economy grow past the COVID-19 recovery you talked about?
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm reminded, I think the last in-person panel I did was one that you moderated, Hilary, for FastLink to LA's launch. So it seems like a lifetime ago, but it was just in March. But
Yeah.
And I applaud the work that Phil and the equity focus that Metro has taken. As you probably know, when we set out to write our sustainability plan, and you think about what is sustainability, and it's the intersection of the environment, equity, and economy. We really were very deliberate about putting equity at the center of our plan and really using it as a focus for our efforts, because we understand that Los Angeles County is a place where there are large numbers of low-income communities and particularly communities of color that are disproportionately affected by environmental pollution, toxins, and climate change, and so it had to be at the core, and I think that has to be part of all of our work. But to think about the connection of land use and transportation, I'm actually a native Angelino. I was born here in the '60s, so I grew up in the suburban sprawl of the San Fernando Valley, and know about how we've designed our communities to be reliant on the car. But I don't necessarily think that DNA, quite honestly, is destiny. And by that, what I mean is that I think we can and we have to change the nature of our region by overcoming these past practices, because they have created the kinds of problems I've pointed out, like childhood asthma and air pollution and the changing climate. And I think the first step in that, if we're really going to build a transit system that works, we need to have land use that actually serves that transit system. And what that means, quite honestly, is more density. And more density, especially around our transit systems, but I'll say not exclusively. And the first place, of course, to look for that is at our zoning laws. And of course, we created, this is not organic, this is something that was actually implemented by policy, was exclusionary zoning. And that was done specifically to stymie racial and economic integration in our communities. But that's not the way our communities have traditionally or historically been designed. And if you think about older communities like Pasadena, you'll see multifamily bungalow courts, and you'll see duplexes and triplexes mixed in with single family homes. And that has not destroyed the property values of Pasadena, and it's actually added to the vibrancy of that community. And so I think that's the kind of, if we're going to use go back to Shakespeare, past being prologue, I think if we're going to think about the past and what lessons it can teach us, we have to go further back than exclusionary zoning. The other thing that we've seen is in the COVID period, the reemergence among land use planners of the idea of the 20-minute city, where almost everything you need is within 20 minutes by walking or biking. And this is something people now, because they're at home and they want to be able to walk to get their groceries, or to go out to pick up a meal at a restaurant, or to do whatever services they need. So we're starting to rethink about this 20-minute city idea. And we've obviously shut down some streets, we've made slow streets, we've taken lanes away so that businesses can operate outdoor. And I'm hopeful that those kinds of changes can stick, but you need actually a certain population density to have a walkable, bikeable city. And I think that we really need to address the density question.
Well, thank you. You ended right on time for us to begin our audience Q&A. I do have another question for Steve when we get back into it, but I wanted to open it up with Q&A at 10:35 as we said we would. So with that, are there Q&A questions that you want to be sending me? I'm looking forward to them. And while we're waiting, I'm going to ask the question I have for Stephen, which is that affordability is often one of the primary concerns expressed in conversations about transitioning to a clean energy future. And what is Southern California Edison doing to address affordability concerns, especially as we move into denser spaces where we're going to need more power on the grid, and looking at things like an EV streetcar and other things in cities that are going to pull in the opportunities to travel cleanly, but may need a lot more power than currently is in our infrastructure right now?
Yeah, thanks, Hilary. So, we feel the same pain with our customers that I think everybody else does. When a third of our customers are on discounted rates because they're low income. 45% of the customers that we serve are in some form of designated disadvantaged community because it's environmentally impacted or low income or other factors. So embedded in a lot of the programs we have and the work we do is making sure that sufficient access to these tools, to programs, to EV charging is the requirements of the investments that we do. Let's step back. I mentioned before our Pathway 2045 and what has to happen over time. One of the things we did that was really important before we put that out there was we analyzed the various scenarios in which we might be able to decarbonize and looked at the cost. And as we've run the numbers and looked at it, not only is it the lowest cost approach to decarbonizing, clean electricity, lots of electrification, but we believe it'll reduce customer energy bills by about a third. So you think about all this investment, if we do it well and we do it smartly, when you think about reduced costs on fossil fuel and gasoline, but putting it into electricity, which is a more naturally efficient use of energy, we can actually reduce costs over time. But there's a lot that has to happen to get there. And so, some of the things we're doing with our programs, I mentioned some of the investments in electric vehicle charging, and of the approximately 2,000 charging ports that we've supported so far, half of those are in those disadvantaged communities. When we look at the investments that we'll do for the next 40,000 chargers, again, I think the percentage is something like 40% of those will be either with multifamily dwellings or in disadvantaged communities. So making sure that when we serve this many customers, we know that there are certain parts of the customer base that can afford this. They will do it on their own. We have to make sure that a lot of our funding is going to places where it's not going to happen naturally. We have to spark investments in grid. And then along the way, we've got to manage the cost of electricity. And so as the costs of managing wildfire and these other risks take things up and up, we're looking for unique ways to, frankly, spread those costs out over time. So how can we, securitize to levelize the costs over time, and just continue to be focused on an affordability mindset with our own spend, being smart with each dollar as we've been moving forward.
Well, that global thinking is so important. And I think to pivot off that, Phil, people forget that the rail system is actually a zero emission system. And can you talk about the rail system and its riders, and also what you're doing in solar and other sustainability efforts? Because I think that people tend to think only about EV buses as the contribution to clean air when you're doing so much more and teaching people through your school about how to actually work on that broader sustainability network.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned our rail. Yeah, absolutely. Zero emission. And we're building more rail. And we'll continue to do that. You mentioned, the bus side. I've already talked a little bit about that, and we're anxious to get more bus rapid transit out there. I think when you think about sustainability, I guess what I also think about are our projects that we're building and being sustainable in building that new infrastructure that we're doing right now, and using products and materials that are sustainable and that last a longer period of time. It's almost like building your house. I mean, you want to use sustainable material. It may cost you more on the front end, but it's going to last longer. And so that is how we're looking at our many projects. We have $20 billion in construction and projects going on right here in LA County. And being sustainable with those approaches are very, very important to us. And that's what we're doing with the many projects. I think one of the things when you think about COVID and sustainability in construction is we really give kudos to our governor and the mayor for saying that and deeming that construction was an essential service. Because I think if we had stopped construction during COVID, it would have really been a nightmare, for everybody. Not to mention the delay and disruption claims that I would have got from contractors. But I think being sustainable in the build out of new infrastructure is something we haven't talked about, but I just wanted to put that on the table because that is a huge piece of what we're doing. And that is one of the reasons, quite honestly, that many of these construction projects, especially on the design side, has increased in cost. They're increased in cost, but they are going to be sustainable for and in use for the next 100 years. And so I think that's very, very important for all of us to understand. People say, well, why does these projects cost so much? I mean, in the design and construction of these projects, we are using new sustainability techniques and embedding sustainability into the construction and the design.
I want to follow up on that as we are starting to look at Prop 16, ability to start broadening the number of contractors and who gets to participate locally in some of these great projects. Can you talk a little bit about how you are also adding sustainability and resiliency and making sure that there's economic development opportunities throughout all of the county, especially looking at the ways in which women and minority companies can be part of your system?
Yeah, I mean, we have been very, very aggressive in making sure that there is participation from women-owned, veteran-owned, disabled-owned businesses in our projects. We've been so aggressive and to the point where what we have said is that those small and minority businesses they should be priming some of these projects and having the traditional prime sub to them. Now that's a complete flip. And we've done that here at Metro. And guess what? Those small and minority firms are doing great, priming projects and having the traditional large firms sub to them. And so we are, I think, leading the nation with regard to opportunities. When you talk about women in non-traditional jobs, we have been at the forefront of that. And I've already talked about the school. I joke about this, but I can't wait to talk to a 15-year-old junior in high school, or maybe a sophomore, junior or senior in high school, and they're talking to me about design build. I mean, you know what I mean? You call it nerdy if you want, but hey, that's going to be a great thing to be talking to young people about sustainability, about infrastructure, and seeing women in non-traditional jobs. I'm very proud of what we're doing. It's something, I spent a lot of time in the military. I spent 25 years in the military, and prior to my transportation experience, we were even then trying to get women in combat arms units, and it's great to see women officers actually commanding some of those combat arms units now. And so we've been doing this, I've been involved with this for many, many years, and we're doing the same thing in the transportation space.
That's great. And Steve, I just want to give you a chance to say similarly, talk about what SCE has been doing in that kind of leadership as well. It's been remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, just on the supplier side, we spend over $2 billion a year with diverse suppliers, and that's been ongoing for quite a long time. So basically, around 40% of our spend goes to diverse suppliers, and you don't get there just by putting RFPs out and saying come one, come all. You've got to develop programs that will create a pipeline. You've got to nurture and mentor a lot of these suppliers and give them opportunities along the way. On the on within our company and how we manage the workforce, that's another big piece of it. Is Phil mentioned the non-traditionals, but beginning to identify those places. Over the next 4 years, we're investing $1 million in getting new craft training for electricians and others that'll come into our workforce that will not be the traditionals that are filling it, but getting it into getting a pipeline built into the disadvantaged communities and some of the underrepresented portion of the population, because these are great paying jobs and they're great skills that will help people. And so we've been beginning to invest more and more upstream into the training and development across the board. So it's hitting on the what we've got already in our workforce, but building in ways to take it to the next level, investing both on the supplier side but on our workforce too.
That's great. And Gary, I wanted to ask you about the governor's recent executive orders on land conservation and on looking at how we can move away from vehicle miles traveled and reduce our impact on roads and towards more electric vehicle and other options. Can you tell me how you're baking that into how you're managing development around the county?
Yeah, but I think before I do that, and I appreciate that question, I do also want to respond to this workforce development and diversity issue, because part of I mentioned this WHAM task force, as we call it, measures WHAM. Just before this conference call or this conference, I was on our workforce subcommittee call with all of the partners, including our workforce development and aid departments and others. And we've been looking actually at Metro's example of the Workforce Innovation Now program, the WIN program, as something that we should be applying consistently across all of our funding measures. There's workforce development money in Measure W, there's workforce development money in Measure A. The homeless services program is looking at how do we put people experiencing homelessness into workforce development programs. And so I think there is a real opportunity to use the word synergy to sort of combine these efforts and really get, as Phil and Metro has done in creating a transportation infrastructure academy, really thinking about an infrastructure academy writ large, whether it's water infrastructure, electric infrastructure, parks, green space, open space infrastructure, all of that, we can start to bring people together. And so that's an exciting idea that we've been pursuing through the WHAM task force. And I know I don't have a lot of time to talk about the governor's executive order, and quite frankly, we haven't had a lot of chance to look at it in any great detail. So, but I think it does provide us with an opportunity to take the lessons we learned, I think, about comprehensive land use planning sort of writ large, and work to then, as we're thinking about, say, habitat conservation or species conservation, really start to streamline processes as well. Because when you put, and we've seen this in the past, like the San Diego multiple species habitat conservation plan in the 90s, that actually led to streamlining environmental reviews. And I think, everybody has their opinion about CEQA, but streamlining where it makes sense is important so that we can achieve our housing goals. We need a lot of houses built. We need to build them in the right places so that we can support things like the transportation system and walkable streets and bikeable streets. And I think the governor's announcement, I think, helps us get there.
Thank you. Well, with that, we need to close on time, but this has been a fantastic, fantastic panel. I want to thank you for all bringing your A game and making sure that we had the best and most up-to-the-minute information on sustainability, transportation, and recovery. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to the rest of the panels today.
Thank you, Hilary. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for joining us for The Future of LA's Infrastructure, Transportation, Power, and Sustainability panel presented by HNTB. Up next, we have the Reimagining Tourism and Hospitality and the New Economy in LA's Entertainment Industry sessions available. Please select your session of choice under the Sessions tab at the top of your screen. We will see you back at 11:10 a.m.